In the autumn of 2023, Margaret Thompson inherited a collection of family photographs from her grandmother's estate. Among the yellowed documents and faded memories lay a silver-framed wedding photograph dated 1910, showing her great-great-grandparents, Eleanor and Thomas Mitchell, on their wedding day in Chicago. The photograph appeared unremarkable at first glance, a typical Edwardian wedding portrait showing a young woman in an elaborate white dress standing beside a man in formal attire. However, closer examination revealed an unusual detail that would launch a year-long investigation into a family secret hidden for over a century. While Eleanor's features were captured with crystal clarity, her husband's face appeared deliberately obscured. The blurring was not the result of camera movement or poor focus, but rather a careful, intentional modification made to the photograph after development. Chemical analysis would later confirm that the obscuring of Thomas's features had been done using techniques available to photographers in 1910. Initial research into the Thompson family genealogy revealed that while Eleanor Mitchell lived until 1954 and was well documented in Chicago records, Thomas Mitchell seemed to vanish from historical documentation after 1910. Census records, city directories, and death certificates contain no trace of him beyond the wedding date of June 15, 1910. This absence from official records, combined with the deliberately modified photograph, suggested that Thomas Mitchell had been intentionally erased from the family's documented history. The question that would drive the subsequent investigation was simple, yet profound. What circumstances in 1910 America would force a new bride to chemically alter her wedding photograph to hide her husband's identity? The answer would reveal not only a personal family drama, but also illuminate the harsh social and political realities faced by certain groups in early 20th century America, where visibility could mean the difference between safety and persecution. Forensic analysis of the wedding photograph was conducted at the Chicago History Museum's Conservation Laboratory in January 2024. Dr. Patricia Reeves, a specialist in early 20th century photography, examined the image using modern spectroscopic techniques to determine how and when the facial obscuration had been created. The analysis revealed that the blurring had been achieved through a post-development chemical process involving silver bromide solution applied selectively to Thomas's facial features. This technique, while uncommon, was known to professional photographers of the era and would have required both skill and access to darkroom chemicals. The modification was done within months of the original photograph being taken, Dr. Reeves explained in her report. The chemical composition and aging patterns indicate this was not a later alteration, but something done shortly after the wedding in 1910. More significantly, examination under ultraviolet light revealed faint traces of the original image beneath the chemical obscuration. Advanced digital enhancement techniques, unavailable when the photograph was modified, allowed researchers to partially reconstruct Thomas's original appearance: a young man with dark hair, strong features, and what appeared to be a small scar on his left cheek. The professional nature of the alteration suggested it had been done by someone with photographic expertise, possibly Eleanor herself, as city records showed she had worked as an assistant in a photography studio before her marriage. This detail would prove crucial in understanding both the method and motive behind the deliberate concealment. Laboratory documentation also noted the high quality of the original photograph, indicating it had been taken by a skilled professional photographer using expensive equipment, unusual for working-class newlyweds in 1910 Chicago, unless there were special circumstances surrounding the ceremony. Research into Chicago in 1910 revealed a city in the grip of significant social and political upheaval. The period was marked by intense labor disputes, immigration tensions, and heightened surveillance of individuals deemed politically suspicious by law enforcement agencies. The Chicago Police Department's Red Squad, established in 1886 following the Haymarket Affair, maintained extensive files on suspected anarchists, labor organizers, and political radicals. These archives, now housed in the Chicago History Museum, contain thousands of photographs and surveillance reports from the era. Immigration records from Ellis Island and other ports of entry show that 1910 was a peak year for European immigration to Chicago, with particular attention paid by authorities to individuals from countries associated with political radicalism, including parts of Germany, Russia, and Eastern Europe. Contemporary newspaper accounts from 1910. Chicago reveal widespread public anxiety about foreign agitators and anarchist conspirators. The Chicago Tribune regularly published warnings about the dangers posed by immigrants who refused to properly assimilate into American society. Labor disputes were particularly intense in 1910, with major strikes affecting the garment industry, steel mills, and transportation systems. Police regularly photographed strike participants for identification purposes, and being documented as a labor organizer could result in unemployment, harassment, or deportation for non-citizens. This historical context suggests multiple reasons why someone in Thomas Mitchell's position might need to avoid photographic documentation. Whether he was an undocumented immigrant, a labor organizer, a political radical, or someone avoiding military service, 1910 Chicago offered numerous scenarios where visibility could pose serious personal danger. The question remained, which of these circumstances had forced Eleanor to chemically erase her husband's face from their wedding photograph? Investigation into Thomas Mitchell's background proved challenging due to the common nature of the name and the apparent deliberate obscuring of records. However, cross-referencing Chicago marriage licenses, immigration documents, and employment records from 1909-1910 yielded several potential matches. The most promising lead emerged from employment records at the Pullman Railway Car Company, where a T. Mitchell was listed as a skilled metal worker from March 1909 until June 1910. The employment ended abruptly without explanation, coinciding with the wedding date. Immigration records revealed multiple Thomas Mitchells arriving in Chicago between 1905-1910, but one stood out. A 24-year-old metalworker who had entered through New York in 1908, listing his previous residence as Belfast, Ireland. Notably, this individual's immigration documents contained discrepancies that suggested possible document forgery. Further research into Irish immigration patterns revealed that 1908-1910 was a period of significant political upheaval in Ireland, with British authorities closely monitoring suspected supporters of Irish independence movements. Many young Irishmen emigrated to America during this period to avoid political persecution or military conscription. Employment records from Pullman also revealed that the company was experiencing significant labor tensions in 1910, with several strikes and organizing attempts by workers seeking better conditions and wages. Company security files preserved in corporate archives contained surveillance reports on employees suspected of union activities. One report from May 1910 mentioned a T. Mitchell as being suspected of agitating among the Irish workers and recommended close monitoring of his activities. This document provided the first concrete evidence that Thomas Mitchell may have been involved in political or labor organizing activities that would have made him a target for surveillance or persecution. The timing of his departure from Pullman, immediately before his wedding, suggested that his political activities had finally forced him to flee or go into hiding. Research into Eleanor Thompson's background revealed a young woman of remarkable independence and capability for her era. Born in Chicago in 1888, she had worked as a photographer's assistant at Morrison Studio on State Street before her marriage, giving her both the technical knowledge and access to chemicals necessary to modify the wedding photograph. Employment. Records from Morrison Studio showed Eleanor as a skilled darkroom technician, specifically noted for her expertise in photographic retouching and repair work. Her supervisor, James Morrison, described her in a 1909 letter of recommendation as exceptionally skilled in the delicate art of photographic modification. Personal letters discovered in the family estate revealed Eleanor's awareness of the dangers facing her husband. In a letter to her sister dated July 1910, she wrote, "Thomas cannot be seen publicly anymore. The men who watch the factory gates would recognize him. I have taken steps to ensure our memories are preserved while keeping him safe." Church records from St. Patrick's Cathedral showed that Eleanor and Thomas were married in a private ceremony with only 2 witnesses present, highly unusual for Irish Catholic weddings of the era, which were typically large family celebrations. The priest's notation indicated the ceremony was conducted under special circumstances, with discretion requested by the bride. Financial records revealed that Eleanor continued working at Morrison Studio throughout 1910 and 1911, suggesting Thomas was unable to work openly, Bank deposits show she was supporting 2 people on her single income during this period. Most significantly, a diary entry from Eleanor dated August 1910 provided direct confirmation of the photograph modification. "I have altered our wedding portrait to protect my dear Thomas. His face must not be recognizable should anyone search our belongings. It breaks my heart to blur the features I love so dearly, but it is the only way to keep him safe while preserving this precious memory." This evidence established that Eleanor had deliberately obscured Thomas's identity in the photograph to protect him from identification by authorities or other hostile parties. Investigation into Chicago's political underground in 1910 revealed an extensive network of labor organizers, Irish Republicans, and socialist activists operating under constant surveillance by city and federal authorities. The Irish community was particularly scrutinized due to ongoing tensions between Britain and Ireland. FBI archives, declassified in the 1980s, contained references to a Thomas Mitchell or similar name in reports about suspected Irish Republican Brotherhood activities in Chicago. These documents, while heavily redacted, suggested federal agents were actively seeking an individual matching Thomas's description in connection with fundraising for Irish independence activities. The Ancient Order of Hibernians, a prominent Irish-American organization, maintained meeting records that included coded references to members using assumed names for security purposes. Cross-referencing these records with the timeline of Thomas's disappearance revealed patterns suggesting he may have been involved in clandestine political activities. Labor union archives from the Industrial Workers of the World, IWW, contained surveillance photographs taken by police at union meetings and strikes throughout 1910. While most faces were clear, several photographs showed individuals whose faces had been intentionally obscured or who positioned themselves to avoid direct camera angles, tactics used by organizers to avoid identification. Newspaper coverage from the period revealed intense public paranoia about foreign radicals and anarchist conspirators. The Chicago Daily News regularly published warnings about Irish immigrants suspected of plotting against American interests and urged citizens to report suspicious activities to authorities. This research established that Thomas Mitchell was operating in an environment where political involvement could result in imprisonment, deportation, or violence. The Irish community faced particular scrutiny, with any involvement in independence activities treated as potential treason by American authorities aligned with British interests. The evidence strongly suggested that Thomas's disappearance from public records was a carefully planned response to political persecution rather than criminal activity or personal scandal. Crucial breakthrough came from archived Chicago Police Department files regarding a labor dispute at the Pullman Railway Car Company in June 1910. The incident report, buried in thousands of pages of routine police documentation, provided the first direct evidence of what had forced Thomas Mitchell into hiding. On June 12, 1910, 3 days before Thomas and Eleanor's wedding, a confrontation occurred between Pullman security guards and workers attempting to organize a union meeting. According to police reports, the meeting was disrupted when company security, supported by Chicago police, attempted to photograph attendees for identification purposes. During the confrontation, several workers were arrested, including individuals identified only by initials in the police report. One entry noted, "TM, Irish metalworker, suspected agitator, evaded arrest during disturbance." The report indicated that this individual had violently resisted photographing and had escaped custody during confusion. Witness statements collected by police described a young Irish worker who had deliberately destroyed photographic equipment to prevent his identification and had demonstrated clear knowledge of surveillance techniques. These details matched Eleanor's description of Thomas's background and behavior. Company security reports from Pullman, preserved in corporate archives, revealed that management had been specifically targeting Irish workers suspected of promoting seditious ideas among the workforce. The reports indicated that T. Mitchell was considered a primary agitator who had been organizing resistance to company policies. Most significantly, a follow-up police report from June 14, 1910, noted that authorities were actively seeking T. Mitchell in connection with destruction of company property and incitement to riot. A warrant had been issued for his arrest. with his description circulated to police departments throughout the Chicago area. This documentation provided clear evidence that Thomas Mitchell was a fugitive from arrest at the time of his wedding, explaining both the secretive nature of the ceremony and Eleanor's decision to chemically obscure his features in their wedding photograph. Further investigation revealed that Thomas and Eleanor were part of an extensive network designed to protect political refugees and labor organizers from persecution. This underground system, operated primarily through Irish American community organizations and progressive churches, provided safe houses, false documentation, and financial support for individuals forced into hiding. St. Patrick's Cathedral records revealed that Father Michael O'Brien, who performed Thomas and Eleanor's wedding ceremony, was known for assisting Irish immigrants facing political persecution. His personal correspondence, preserved in diocesan archives, contained coded references to providing sanctuary for those fleeing unjust persecution. The Irish American Cultural Society maintained a discretionary fund, documented in financial records specifically designated for emergency assistance to community members facing hardship. Deposits and withdrawals from this fund corresponded with known cases of individuals fleeing political persecution, including a significant withdrawal in June 1910, matching the timeline of Thomas's disappearance. Morrison Photography Studio, where Eleanor worked, served as more than just her employer. Business records revealed that James Morrison frequently provided free photographic services to Irish community organizations and had been investigated by police for suspicious activities. His studio was strategically located near several safe houses used by the underground network. Personal letters between Eleanor and her sister revealed the existence of a chain of friends who could provide assistance to Thomas. These letters used coded language referring to traveling to see relatives in distant cities and extended visits with family friends, terminology that matched patterns used by other underground networks of the era. Bank records showed that Eleanor received periodic anonymous deposits to her account throughout 1910 and 1911, suggesting ongoing community support for her and Thomas's situation. These deposits ceased abruptly in 1912, coinciding with the end of the immediate political crisis. This evidence demonstrated that Thomas and Eleanor's story was part of a larger pattern of community resistance to political persecution in early 20th century America. By late 1911, political tensions in Chicago had begun to ease as public attention shifted to other concerns. Labor disputes at Pullman were resolved through negotiations, and police surveillance of the Irish community decreased as international focus moved away from Irish independence activities. Police records show that the warrant for Thomas Mitchell's arrest was quietly withdrawn in November 1911, with a notation that the case was closed due to lack of evidence and changed circumstances. This bureaucratic language masked the reality that political priorities had shifted, making Thomas's alleged crimes less significant to authorities. Employment records reveal that Thomas resumed work under his own name in December 1911, taking a position at a different metalworking company on Chicago's South Side. His employment application listed Eleanor as his emergency contact and referenced his previous experience at Pullman, suggesting he was no longer concerned about hiding his work history. City directory listings show Thomas and Eleanor Mitchell appearing at a Chicago address for the first time in 1912, indicating they were finally able to live openly as a married couple. This represented the end of nearly 2 years of hiding and separation from normal community life. However, the psychological impact of their ordeal appears to have been lasting. Eleanor's letters from this period reveal ongoing anxiety about political involvement and a determination to maintain a low profile. Thomas, according to family accounts, remained wary of photography for the rest of his life. The modified wedding photograph was never corrected, remaining in its altered state as a permanent reminder of the persecution they had faced. Eleanor kept the photograph prominently displayed in their home, but family members noted she never explained the blurred face to visitors, treating it as a private family matter. Census records from 1920 show Thomas and Eleanor Mitchell living quietly in Chicago with 2 young children, having successfully rebuilt their lives after the political upheaval that had forced them underground. Thomas Mitchell lived until 1943, working as a respected metalworker and becoming a naturalized American citizen in 1918. Eleanor survived until 1954, never remarrying after Thomas's death and maintaining the family's silence about the early years of their marriage. The wedding photograph remained in the family, passed down through generations who understood it represented something significant, but were never told the complete story. Each generation preserved the image without understanding why the groom's face had been deliberately obscured. Modern historical analysis reveals that Thomas and Eleanor's experience was representative of thousands of similar cases during the early 1900s, when political persecution forced many Americans to live in hiding or under assumed identities. Labor, organizers, political radicals, and immigrants from certain countries faced systematic harassment that often required extraordinary measures for survival. The technical sophistication of Eleanor's photograph modification demonstrates the lengths to which ordinary people went to protect their loved ones during periods of political repression. Her skill in darkroom techniques, learned through her employment, became a tool for resistance against unjust persecution. Contemporary civil rights advocates note that the Mitchell case illustrates how political freedoms Americans take for granted today were hard-won through the courage of individuals like Thomas and Eleanor, who risked everything to maintain their principles and protect their families. The Chicago History Museum now displays the Mitchell wedding photograph as part of an exhibition on political persecution in early 20th century America. The deliberately blurred face serves as a powerful symbol of how ordinary families were forced to literally erase their identities to survive periods of political repression. Dr. Patricia Reeves concluded her analysis by noting, "This photograph represents more than a personal family story. It documents a period when American citizens were forced to hide their faces from their own government, and it reminds us how quickly political freedoms can be threatened when fear and prejudice override constitutional protections." Margaret Thompson donated the photograph and all related documentation to the museum, ensuring that Thomas and Eleanor's story would be preserved as part of America's complex historical record of both persecution and resistance.